What if everything you thought you knew about this family was built on half-truths, quiet alliances, and information that was never meant to travel beyond closed doors? This story does not begin with betrayal. It begins with survival, fear, and a promise to never be powerless again. Stay with me, because one sentence spoken years later exposes a pattern that changes how every moment before it should be seen. And once you notice it, you cannot unsee it. I was living in a place where survival was not a metaphor, but a daily calculation, where heat came from effort and nights were measured by how long the fire lasted, and every dollar had a purpose before it was even earned, and that purpose was always the same: children first, shelter first, food first, light first, and nothing else mattered. Not pride, not comfort, not reputation. And when the phone rang and it was another call asking for money, the answer never changed, because there was nothing left after the basics. And explaining that reality over and over hardened something inside me, a resolve that I would never allow my life to return to that level of uncertainty again. And that resolve quietly became the engine behind every choice that followed. And people who have never lived in that kind of scarcity often misunderstand the mindset that comes with it, because it is not about greed or ambition. It is about control and safety, and ensuring that no outside force can ever threaten the roof over your children's heads again. And when opportunity appears in that state, it does not look like romance or destiny. It looks like stability. And when stability is scarce, it becomes irresistible. And that is where this story truly begins. Not with fame or cameras, but with a promise made in silence to never be powerless again. And when entering a new family structure, that promise did not disappear. It adapted, and the environment it entered was complex, layered, emotional, and governed by unspoken rules, where power did not always align with affection, and where status mattered more than words. And in that system, the most valuable position was not the loudest or the warmest, but the one with legitimacy, the one whose name carried legal and symbolic weight. And recognizing that reality was not cruelty, it was awareness. And awareness guided strategy, and strategy shaped relationships. And so connections were formed, not randomly, but intentionally, beginning with the person whose position mattered most. And trust was built slowly, carefully, through listening, validation, shared vulnerability, and creating a sense of safety that felt genuine because it was designed to be. And when someone feels truly seen after years of neglect, they open doors they do not even realize exist. And behind those doors are fears, insecurities, frustrations, and secrets that were never meant to travel further. And once shared, those truths took on a new role, not as betrayals, but as tools. And information has power when it moves in only one direction. And the movement was subtle enough that no one noticed at first, because it was framed as concern, as loyalty, as honesty. And when information reaches authority framed that way, it is rarely questioned. And so conversations began to echo. Elsewhere, questions appeared without origins, conflict sparked without clear cause, and trust began to erode not from explosions, but from confusion. And confusion is the most effective destabilizer, because it makes people doubt themselves. And when people doubt themselves, they look outward for answers, and the person closest to authority becomes the most believable source. And this pattern did not emerge once. It emerged repeatedly across different relationships and different moments. And every time, the outcome was the same: distance, isolation, and withdrawal. And the same person remained unaffected, positioned as supportive, misunderstood, and loyal. And that consistency matters, because coincidence does not repeat with such precision. And while the audience watched a narrative about unity and shared values, what was happening underneath was a slow reshaping of the family dynamic, where alliances shifted quietly and influence consolidated steadily. And the most effective part of the strategy was its invisibility, because nothing appeared overt, nothing felt aggressive. Everything could be justified as concern or honesty. And when loyalty is framed as protection, it becomes untouchable, and no one challenges it without appearing unreasonable. And over time, the emotional center of the family shifted until decisions, reactions, and narratives all flowed through a single lens. And when that happens, dissent becomes betrayal, and silence becomes survival. And the ones most affected were those who trusted most, because trust was the entry point. And that realization changes how every earlier moment is understood, because scenes that once seemed emotional now appear strategic, and reactions that once felt confusing now make sense. And a single statement, spoken much later, unlocked years of unanswered questions, because it confirmed what many had suspected but could not prove: that information had been shared, boundaries crossed, and influence exercised intentionally. And once that confirmation existed, the past could no longer be seen the same way, because it revealed a through line of behavior rather than isolated incidents. And when patterns become visible, they are impossible to ignore. And the unsettling truth is that the strategy worked because it relied on patience and proximity rather than force. And that is the kind of influence that lasts longest, because it leaves no fingerprints. And as viewers begin to re-examine the timeline, the story takes on a different tone, not one of chaos, but of control, not one of misunderstanding, but of design. And that understanding creates suspense, because it raises new questions about how much was curated, how much was concealed, and how much remains unspoken. And the deeper you go, the clearer it becomes that this was never about a single conflict or a single relationship. It was about reshaping an entire structure until only one version of reality remained intact, and everyone else was dismissed as emotional or disloyal or unstable. And that is how narratives are won, not through confrontation, but through consistency and proximity to power. And the question that lingers is not what happened, but what happens next. Because when strategies succeed once, they rarely stop, and the motivation that drove them still exists. And that is why the story does not feel finished, because the same dynamics are still present, and the same patterns are still observable. And until truth is fully spoken, the tension remains. And that tension keeps pulling the audience forward, because once you sense that something essential has been withheld, you cannot stop watching. And that is the loop, because every answer leads to another question, and every revelation reveals another layer. And the story continues, not because it is dramatic, but because it is unresolved. And resolution requires honesty, and honesty has not yet fully arrived. After the shift in legal status, the surface of the family changed, but the emotional undercurrent did not, because titles do not erase hierarchy, and paperwork does not remove memory. And even with new security, there remained an invisible ceiling, the kind that exists when history grants authority that cannot be transferred. And that ceiling mattered, because in systems built on order, symbolism is everything, and being first carries weight that being chosen later never fully replaces. And that unspoken imbalance continued to fuel behavior, because the goal evolved from stability into control of narrative. And when narrative control becomes the objective, actions stop being reactive and start becoming preventative. And that is where the story deepens, because moments that appeared accidental begin to look like opportunities that were simply seized at the right time. And one of the most effective ways to reshape perception is to position yourself as the only reliable source of truth. And that position was strengthened through repeated reinforcement. Each time information shared in confidence appeared elsewhere, each time reactions occurred without explanation, and each time authority sided with the same voice, the hierarchy tightened and trust eroded further. And what made it especially effective was the emotional framing, because everything was cloaked in concern, loyalty, and protection. And when influence is delivered through care, it is rarely challenged. And when someone feels abandoned, isolated, or unsure, they are more likely to accept explanations that give their pain meaning, even if those explanations redirect responsibility. And this dynamic played out again when external connections entered the picture during moments of deep loneliness and vulnerability. And instead of being shielded, those moments were observed, monitored, and quietly leveraged, because awareness without intervention is not neutrality, it is permission. And when a situation is allowed to continue because it serves a purpose, that purpose becomes the silent driver of everything that follows. And as events unfolded, the fallout was uneven. One person bore public scrutiny, another bore silence, and the one who benefited remained insulated, framed as the steady presence amid chaos. And that framing endured because repetition builds credibility, and credibility hardens into belief, and belief shapes memory. And over time, the version of events that survived was not necessarily the most accurate, but the most consistently reinforced. And when inconsistencies surfaced, they were minimized, redirected, or explained away by authority and certainty and confidence. And the voices that could have challenged the narrative were either dismissed or restrained. And silence became the price of remaining connected. And that silence protected more than it healed, because it preserved an image that required maintenance. And preservation requires constant vigilance. And that vigilance manifested. When you step back and look at the full timeline, this was never about one argument or one relationship. It was about patterns, power, and control built quietly over time. The truth does not always explode. Sometimes it waits patiently, and when it finally surfaces, it forces you to question everything you thought you understood. And the real question now is not what happened back then, but what happens when the silence finally ends.